in Isaiah chapter 28 tonight. All this and the way these things are going to happen, there's going to be talking quite a bit around Jerusalem and things like that. So the name Jerusalem means the city of peace. But throughout history, it's been associated a whole lot more with conflict than it has been with peace. Even like today, Jerusalem and, all the conflict over around Israel and with Israel, it's a lot more conflict than peace over there. Jerusalem's kind of a focal point there in the Middle East, it seems like, for all this. So that's why we're always talking about pray for Israel and pray for the peace in Jerusalem, because even the book of Psalms will tell you to pray for Jerusalem. But why does it say for us to pray for Jerusalem? Why doesn't it say pray for London, pray for Moscow, or pray for Rome or something like that? Well, it's because when true peace comes to Jerusalem, it's going to be peace over the whole world whenever it comes back. That'll be the final place, the real place that peace, that is peace, is going to take place. So here in chapter 28 through chapter 31, we're going to find, we hear about the woes of the Bible. Well, this is where we're going to kind of run into them. There's 5 woes that are going to focus primarily kind of on or around Jerusalem. And then there'll be a 6th woe, but it's going to be about promises of restoration coming after the judgment. So Isaiah's tried to get Judah's rulers, the people running all that stuff at the time, to quit trusting in power politics and quit trusting in international and intercontinental treaties and stuff like that, and to just trust the Lord in what they're looking at, which is a big thing for us, This day and time, we trusted so many things, and when all of this other stuff don't work, then we trust in the Lord. Why don't we just trust in the Lord to start with, And so that's what he's trying to show these people. Now, Isaiah was a very devout Jew himself. He loved Jerusalem. He knew that Jerusalem was the holy city, and that also it was the city of David. It's the city where God dwelt. But Isaiah, in his prophecy, could see storms coming, okay? And he told them folks to turn to God because he knew that these hard times were going to come upon them. He told of God's judgment, and here he's going to speak on the judgments on Ephraim, which Ephraim, we've talked before, is the northern territory of Judah. And he prayed and told them, and wanted people to see what was going on around them. And that's all he wanted them to do. He just wanted them to notice what was going on around them so that they would do something about it, okay? This trouble came to the north. And that north is where we're here, and we'll talk of Samaria. That's up there in that Ephraim, in that northern Judah place. And the thing about it is, and the reason the trouble came to them, is that they felt pretty much impregnable. They thought that they was smart enough and slick enough and powerful enough that nobody could come in there and get them, And one of the reasons that they felt this way is because they were just eat up with pride, If y'all ever been, I pray you hadn't been, but have you known somebody that's so full of pride and so full of arrogance that they stub their toe all the time, They always get in a wreck because they don't want help, they can't accept help, whatever, But that pride was a big thing with them. And also was their abuse of wine. They were alkies, to tell you the truth, I think is what it was. Wine, when first talked about, was a gift of God. And nowhere in the Bible does it tell you that you can't drink wine and stuff. But what it does tell you is don't be drunk. And these people were staying pretty drunk, is what they were doing. So God wasn't happy about that. So God was at the point where he was not going to be quiet about this stuff anymore. Matter of fact, he was going to start being pretty loud and thundering, you could say, about all this stuff. And so that's kind of where we're at here at chapter 28. It's going to talk about some of the modern things going on, things that are relevant for them today, and then it's going to drift right on in back towards the day of the Lord and the millennium that's yet coming. So let's look at verse number 1. Woe to the crowd of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is fading flower, which is at the head of the verdant valleys, to those who are overcome with wine. See, I told y'all they were winos. So comes this first woe we were talking about. You know, the northern kingdom, Ephraim, this northern kingdom and this Ephraim speaks about, this is where the 10 northern tribes lived, or Samaria. So there's a good bit of folks there. And it talks about, it says drunkards. And where it talks about drunkards, it's both literal and spiritual. They were kind of in a stupor as far as their spiritual understanding was. I mean, which if they were drunk all the time, you could kind of understand that. I don't know why. You know, I worked in bars and stuff for about 15 years. And if you asked anybody that was about half, 3/4 lit, they were the smartest person in the place, you know. And so these people thought that they were so smart for all this. One, they thought they were smart because they was on the wine. And the other part they were smart is because they weren't listening. They weren't following the Lord, okay? And so they thought they were smart among themselves and in themselves. And then the wine didn't help them out too much. So what it was this spiritual drunkenness that they had. It wasn't just the spiritual drunkenness, but as much as also the physical drunkenness of these folks over here. So they were just having a lot of trouble. They were following themselves. They were prideful. They were drunk. They weren't following the Lord, and the Lord had just about had enough of it, okay? And so that's what he's talking about, this woe that's on them. They weren't following the word, and they weren't sober. So verse number 2. Behold, the Lord has a mighty and strong one, like a tempest of hail and destroying storm, like a flood of mighty waters overflowing, who will bring them down to earth with his hand. All right, this is designating, you know, what it's talking about, this storm that it's talking about here, this mighty one, this hand. He's talking about the Assyrians, because he's going to use the Assyrians to overtake them again. I think the Assyrians has overtook them once or twice already, and they hadn't learned nothing, so here come the Assyrians again. And so they're this mighty destroying storm. They're going to sweep over them like a flood of mighty waters, you know. And, you know, that's the thing about a flood. When a flood comes like that, it leaves lots of destruction, and it don't cull nothing. You know, when you see a big flood like that, it takes away everything. It strips the ground to pretty much everything. And so that's what he's telling them is going to happen to them unless they change or something happens, that this mighty storm and this flood's going to come and change their life pretty dramatically. Verses 3 and 4. The crowd of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim, will be trampled underfoot. And the glorious beauty is fading flower, which is at the head of the verdant valley, like the first fruit before the summer, which observer sees. He eats it up while it's still in his hand. So he's talking about this valley and the flowers and the fruit kind of stuff. And so what it is there's still a great beauty in this valley, you know, and there's still some good things in this valley. But it's talking about it's going to be eaten up, it's going to be destroyed, because when this flood comes, it's going to take it all. So again, that day, you know, heading into the future, towards the day of the Lord, to the great tribulations, you know, they had this crowd of, this wrong deal. So, you know, it's a beauty and development, this city and everything where they're at. There's the great development, there's commerce, but God's just judging them, and he's bringing them down, and he's bringing down this high civilization, you know, because they're not they're not worthy of all of the greatness that they have accumulated because they're not following God. So he's going to smite them down one more time. And that's what he's telling them, you know. And this is something that's going to happen pretty quick because he's talking about present day stuff, okay? Verse number 5. In that day the Lord of hosts will be for a crown of glory and a diadem of beauty to the remnant of his people. For the ones that are following, the ones that are going to be there, it's going to be good, you know. But they're headed to this future is coming, you know. We're talking about the day of the Lord, the great tribulation is coming. And these people were wearing this crown of pride. And what it's telling them is that crown of pride is going to be gone. He's fixing to strip y'all of all this pride and everything to make you see the bad ways you're coming. And you know, I mean, that's kind of like us. I mean, kind of like when you get too big for your britches, something's going to happen. It's going to smite you back down, okay? We've seen it happen way, way too many times to know that the Lord's going to let you just continue on that path. And so that's what's going to, you know, happen with these folks. Now, the millennium's coming right behind the Great Tribulation. Now, they're going to get another crown, but what they'll get is a crown of glory from the Lord at that time when the Lord gets all this stuff straightened out and separated the way that he wants it. But until that time, unless they got some change coming on, they got some rough road ahead of them. Verse 6 and 7. For a spirit of justice to him who sits in judgment, and for strength to those who turn back to battle at the gate. But they also have erred through wine, and through intoxicating drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through intoxicating drink. They are swallowed up by wine. They are out of the way through intoxicating drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. You think God's got a problem with this intoxicating drink? It sure sounds like it here. Now, verse 6 is talking about, you know, some of these people, you know, they're going to turn the battle away at the gate. There's always a remnant. There's always some folks that are going to stand out. They're going to stay the test of time. So he's talking about them. But now everybody else, they live just pretty much to indulge in drinking heavily, you know. And, you know, we all know, or some of us know, that the history from there to here just repeats itself. I mean, indulging and even out to in the starting effects indulging is that man's thought and man's decisions are altered. I mean, they show you that with these different driving tests and stuff that they've done, or they can show you that with these I don't know what they call them, but they're like beer goggles. They put them on. That shows you how your vision has changed from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 drinks, you know, and so all of that's altered. Your thought process has changed. Your thought process is slowing down, and things that used to be a bad decision, now they just don't seem so bad anymore, you know. And so this is what he's talking about, that all this is stumbling, and they're failing on paying attention to the Lord, and they're paying attention to themselves, and the self that they're paying attention to don't even make sense no more. So these folks are really kind of lost in all this deal, okay? So that's what he's telling them in verses 8 through 12. Let's look at that. For all the tables are full of vomit and filth. Sounds really nice to me. No place is clean. It's like being around a bunch of drunks, right? Whom will he teach knowledge, and whom will he make to understand the message? Who's teachable? Who's going to listen? Those just weaned from milk? Ain't nobody just weaned from milk. They're all other stuff. Those just drawn from the breast. He's talking about who we're going to train, just the little babies that ain't old enough to drink yet? For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. For with stammering lips and another tongue he will speak to this people, to whom he said, this is the rest with which you may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing, yet they would not hear. So he's telling them, you're not hearing me, you're not listening to me. And this stuff where he's talking about precept on precept on precept, that's the way God does this. How many times have you ever read the Bible and you saw something you understand? But then the rest of that stuff, it really doesn't make any sense. And you stew on it, and God helps you with that. And then you read along, and you read that part, and you understand it, and then you get to understand another part. And so that's what he's talking about. The way God teaches us is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. He's never going to put on you more than you can handle. So he's not going to reveal some of these things in the Bible, because if he did, it would just blow our minds. So he's going to take you back down there, just like it says in the Bible. He's going to start you on the milk of the Word. And when you get used to the milk of the Word, you can stand the milk of the Word. Then it's time to get off the milk of the Word, get on the meat of the Word, and start really learning what God's got to say. And so it's an always stacking, always building, always advancing, living Word that we're taking. And that's what he's telling them. He's, look, I ain't laid nothing on you that you can't take. I hadn't come in here and just opened the door and dumped a dump truck of this stuff on you, you know. It's kind of like that deal about that preacher, you know. The guy from the church came to the preacher that one day, and he said, "Preacher, that was a really, really mighty fine sermon. That was a sure enough good sermon." The preacher said, "Yeah, it was." He said, "But, you know, we didn't really have the crowd today that I thought we should have." And that guy said, "Well, I'm glad you noticed that, preacher." And he said, "I just want to tell you," he said, "you know, about that sermon," he said, "that's kind of like when I go feed my cows." He said, "When I feed my cows," he said, "if they all don't show up, I don't dump the whole bag on them, you know." So he's telling the preacher, "I think you gave us a little more than we needed today." And, you know, and I think that's what these people maybe were trying to tell God. "Oh, you gave us all this too much, too big, too soon," you know. But the Lord said, Isaiah said, "No, that's not the way the Lord works, you know. The Lord has been showing you. He's been telling you. And he's been teaching you. But you're blinded by self-will. You're blinded and numbed by alcohol. You're swallowed up by your own pride, and you just won't listen." And that's what he's telling these people. You just need to listen. So, in verse 13, that's where we're going to end up tonight. "But the word of the Lord was to them, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little, that they might go and fall backward and be broken and snared and caught." You know, they go backward from this stuff because they're not willing to learn any of it. You know, he lays it out there, and he lays it a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit, trying to get them to understand it. But these people don't want to do nothing but go backwards because they don't want to listen to it. They don't want to learn anything. They want to do what they want to do, and really what it tells me is that they're so drunk they really don't know what the right thing to do is. And so they're really messing up, okay? So precept upon precept pretty much equals time and time again. He's told them time and time again. As we've been looking through this prophecy, we see them. What do? We hear about these same places. Judgment, they get better. Judgment, they get better. Judgment, they get better. So, you know, they're precept upon precept to themselves, but not in a good way. You know, God has led and even layered these teachings to no avail for these people. They were slothful. They were lazy for God. People that won't learn, all they wanted was their own twisted desires, and you know they were spiraling down. You know, just spiraling down. You know, and there's a lot of folks today that aren't really satisfied with Christianity, with their Christian lives. And if you've ever sat and listened to somebody that's kind of unsatisfied with this, mostly, I'm going to tell you the reason that there's no satisfaction is due to ignorance to the word. You know, they hear the word Christianity, they get saved, and they think that's it. They don't go to church that much, if they go at all. They don't study the word of God. They've not been in Bible studies. They've not been seeking to understand the things God's showing them. So they're upset because they think, well, I'll go to church, I'll get saved, I'll hit the church for 30, 45 days, and, you know, everything will probably turn out pretty good for me, you know, but that turns out to no avail, you know, to anything really. I mean, there's no month of church. That ain't but 4 days going to church, you know, and there's no course, you know, that's going to teach them that. I mean, it's a lifelong commitment to learn these things. There's no emotional high, and sometimes I think people are caught on that emotional high, you know. I know that I've been in some churches before when I was a kid. I didn't like them, and I didn't stay and go back to them, but I've been in churches where they really, really press you on an emotional high, especially kids when they get saved. You know, when there's kids getting saved, boy, they get you on this emotional high and try to get the whole congregation of kids up there at one time, and I'm just not a believer in that, you know. I don't think it ought to be emotional at all, you know. And none of that stuff, no course, no 4 to 5 days, no 60, 80, 90 days, 120 days in church, you know, no emotional high can explain away or do what that commitment to the Lord and that commitment to learning, that commitment to training yourself can accomplish. I mean, God allows us to receive those things that we can use. I remember one of the first times when I was reading in the Bible, right after, I really wasn't saved yet, but I was trying to clean some things up in my life, and I was reading in this little Bible I had it in my pocket, and I carried it to work, and I would read it whenever I had a chance. And I remember reading in it, and even though I didn't know the Lord, because I was hunting in the Word, He revealed a few things to me. I read something and I was like, ooh, I understand this, you know. I mean, it was big news, you know, for me. And so I know that that's the way God does. God allows us to receive those things that we can use. And once we receive that thing we can use, then He builds another thing. Like it says, layer upon layer, precept upon precept. And that's the only way that you can learn from God, you know. It's not like, hey, look, man, I'm going to read the book of John, and I'm going to know everything there is to know about the book of John. You read the book of John, and you be confused is what you be. You got to study the book of John, you know, like all the rest of these things. If you read through Isaiah and just read through it to be reading through it, it ain't nothing in here really that'll hit you. Unless you slow down and look and study some of this stuff, you know, in the Word. I've been going to a Bible study on Monday mornings with some preachers, and they're all seminary taught and trained guys, and I just sit there and I listen to them because, man, they come up with some stuff that I don't know where they're pulling it out of, but it's all God stuff, you know. I tell them I'm just glad to sit in there and listen to them. I said, because unless it's common sense and it makes sense, it's over my head, you know. But still, in all of their education, I'll come up with something sometime and I'll say something about something just in a common sense way, and they kind of have to stop and ponder what I said. So there's no right way to learn this except to study it, to be open to it, to accept it. And these people weren't. They just weren't listening to it, you know. They were just, they were playing the game, and, you know, you can't play with God, you know. You can't tell God, yeah, look, I'm all in, and I want to be your people and everything, and, you know, and show up here after beer bust, you know. And that's what these people were doing. They were drunk on the wine, and they were drunk on the pride, and all they wanted to listen to was themselves. And so you know what they got? Drama. And that's all they got was drama. And it was going to get worse for them. So that's kind of where they are at this point in Judah. And it's going to get worse before it gets any better. And the sad thing about us as people is a lot of times things have to get worse before it gets better because we're so smart that we know everything, you know. And, you know, we're so smart. And nobody can tell us anything. Nobody can show us anything. So what we have to do is just like my dad told me. My dad told me that I was going to have one of the most expensive educations a man could buy. And I said, what is that? He said, you, my friend, will graduate from the School of Hard Knocks, and it's going to cost you. You know what? He was a pretty smart old bird because it's been proven true. So there you go. All right, we appreciate y'all being online with us tonight. If we can do anything for you or help you, y'all give us a call, holler at me, and I'll see what I can do for you. Y'all come visit us on Wednesday night and have church with us and prayer meeting and supper. Come see us on Sunday mornings. Sunday mornings at 10:30. We'll be here and we'll celebrate the Word of God and listen to some good music. So y'all come on and be with us.